What if I told you that a simple family secret about inheritance could become the catalyst for divine intervention that transforms broken family relationships forever? My name is Sarah Elizabeth Matthews, and for the past 3 exhausting years, I thought I knew everything about my parents' true financial situation. We were middle class, struggling desperately to make ends meet, barely getting by on Social Security payments and my father's modest pension from 30 years of factory work. I had been the dutiful daughter who sacrificed my own dreams, my own future, my own happiness to care for them in their golden years. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, working 2 physically exhausting jobs just to help pay for Dad's mounting medical bills and Mom's expensive prescription medications. But Jesus had whispered something profound and life-changing in my ear that would completely transform everything I believed about provision, family loyalty, divine timing, and God's perfect plan for our lives. Little did I know that this whisper would lead to the most shocking family revelation imaginable. For 3 long, difficult years, I had been living in that small bedroom where I grew up, surrounded by faded posters and childhood memories that reminded me daily of dreams I had put on hold, while my siblings Michael and Rebecca had moved to different states, built successful careers, started families, and rarely visited our parents. They sent birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside and made brief, awkward holiday phone calls filled with polite conversation. But when it came to the daily grind of caring for aging parents, dealing with endless doctor appointments, managing complex medications, helping with grocery shopping, and providing emotional support during health scares, that overwhelming responsibility fell squarely on my shoulders. I didn't complain, at least not out loud. But the burden was becoming heavier every day. I didn't mind the sacrifice, or at least I constantly told myself I didn't mind giving up my own life for theirs. Well, that's not entirely truthful if I'm being honest with myself and with God. There were countless sleepless nights when I cried myself to sleep, staring at the familiar ceiling of my childhood room, wondering if I would ever have my own life, my own family, my own dreams fulfilled before it was too late. I watched my college friends through social media getting married, buying beautiful houses, starting exciting careers, traveling the world, while I was trapped in what felt like an endless cycle of caregiving that seemed to have no light at the end of the tunnel. But every single morning, I would kneel beside my bed and pray earnestly, feeling Jesus reminding me that honoring my parents was his sacred commandment, and that he would provide for all my needs according to his riches in glory. Little did I know that his provision was already working in mysterious ways. I couldn't even begin to imagine what I didn't know, what none of us children knew. What had been carefully hidden from our family for years was that my parents had been keeping a massive, earth-shattering secret that would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I understood about our family's financial situation, our struggles, our sacrifices, and our future. They had been hiding a will, concealing bank statements, covering up investment portfolios, and the shocking truth about what they had planned for their estate was about to emerge in the most unexpected, most dramatic, most life-changing way possible. This secret would either destroy our family forever or become the foundation for the greatest miracle of restoration we had ever witnessed. But Sarah was about to discover that her parents' secret about the inheritance worth millions of dollars was actually Jesus preparing divine provision that would vindicate her faithful service, reward her sacrificial love, heal generational wounds, restore family relationships, and demonstrate God's perfect justice beyond anything humanly possible. The plan of God for this family was about to unfold in the most miraculous, most transformative way imaginable. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning in October, when I was frantically organizing Dad's chaotic desk drawer, desperately searching for his insurance paperwork after a terrifying health scare. He had been hospitalized the week before with severe chest pains that had terrified all of us, and I needed to submit claims for his extensive cardiac tests, electrocardiograms, stress tests, overnight monitoring, and consultations with specialists. The medical bills were piling up faster than we could manage them, and I was already working double shifts at both the local diner and the grocery store just to keep our heads above water financially, while trying to maintain some semblance of hope. As I rifled through the usual overwhelming collection of old receipts, expired warranties, outdated coupons, rubber bands, paper clips, random scraps of paper with illegible notes, and decades of accumulated paperwork, My fingers brushed against something unusual tucked carefully behind a thick stack of bank statements. My heart immediately started racing with anticipation when I realized what I had discovered hidden there. It was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and slightly brittle to the touch, with last will and testament written across the front in Dad's distinctive, careful handwriting. The ink was faded but still clearly legible, and the paper felt expensive, official, important, completely different from anything else in that cluttered drawer. My hands began trembling uncontrollably as I held this mysterious document that seemed to pulse with significance. This wasn't the simple, basic will I had helped them prepare 5 years ago through the free legal aid clinic downtown. That will had been straightforward and unremarkable, dividing their modest assets equally among the 3 children, leaving their small house, their old car, and whatever meager savings they might have accumulated over their working years. This envelope felt different, looked different, seemed to contain something much more significant and potentially life-changing than anything I had expected to find in that ordinary desk drawer. As I sat there in the quiet sanctuary of Dad's study, surrounded by the familiar, comforting smell of his Old Spice aftershave and the gentle, rhythmic tick of the antique grandfather clock that had belonged to his father before him, I felt Jesus whispering directly to my spirit with crystal clarity, "Sarah, my beloved daughter, I have been preparing something extraordinary and wonderful for you that your eyes have not seen, your ears have not heard, and your mind has not conceived. Trust completely in my perfect timing, for I am about to reveal my incredible faithfulness to those who honor their parents with sacrificial love and unwavering devotion." I knew I shouldn't open that envelope without permission. Every fiber of my moral being told me this was their private document, their personal business to share when they felt ready, when they chose to reveal whatever secrets it contained. But something deep in my spirit, something that felt unmistakably like divine curiosity mixed with holy anticipation, urged me to understand what my parents had been hiding from us children all these years. The envelope was already partially torn at one corner, as if someone had started to open it before changing their mind, before deciding the timing wasn't right for revelation. Between whispered prayers and a heart prepared for whatever shocking truth awaited me. This discovery would reveal how God's mysterious providence had been working behind the scenes for decades, orchestrating events, preparing blessings, and setting up a divine revelation that would transform our family forever. Jesus had secrets that neither my parents nor my siblings nor I could have imagined, and his intricate plan for divine justice, perfect timing, and miraculous provision was about to begin unfolding in ways that would challenge everything we thought we knew about his character, his methods, and his incredible love for faithful servants. The contents of that envelope completely shattered everything I thought I knew about my family's true financial situation, and left me gasping for breath in shock. Inside was a will dated 15 years ago, along with official bank statements, detailed investment documents, property deeds for multiple real estate holdings, and legal papers that revealed a shocking, almost unbelievable truth. My parents were millionaires. Not just comfortable, not just financially secure, not just getting by with a little extra padding in their savings account. They were legitimate millionaires with substantial wealth that had been growing and compounding for decades while we children believed they were struggling to survive. Not just comfortable, not just secure, not just well-off, millionaires, multimillionaires, actually, with assets that made my head spin as I tried to comprehend the staggering numbers I was seeing on these official documents with letterheads from prestigious financial institutions. The detailed financial statements showed multiple investment accounts with six-figure balances that seemed impossible, substantial dividend payments arriving monthly like clockwork, rental properties in 3 different states generating significant passive income, and a diversified stock portfolio that had grown exponentially over the past 2 decades through careful management and compound interest. My father, who had always complained bitterly about the rising cost of groceries and constantly turned down the thermostat to save a few dollars on heating bills, who clipped coupons religiously and drove a 15-year-old car with rust spots, had been sitting on a fortune worth over $3.2 million. The hypocrisy was staggering. But that revelation wasn't even the most shocking part of this earth-shattering discovery that would change everything. According to the detailed provisions of this will, everything, every single asset, every investment account, every piece of real estate, every stock certificate, was being left exclusively to me, not split 3 ways among the children, as I had always naturally assumed would be the case. Not divided equally between Michael, Rebecca, and myself. Everything was specifically designated for Sarah Elizabeth Matthews, our faithful daughter who has consistently shown the heart of Christ in caring for us when others pursued their own selfish interests and abandoned their family responsibilities. I felt physically sick, emotionally angry, spiritually confused, and completely overwhelmed by this revelation. Had my parents been deliberately lying to me about their true finances while I sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my potential future to care for them? Had they been secretly testing me, watching carefully to see if I would remain faithful and loving, even when I believed there was no earthly reward waiting for my sacrificial service? And what about Michael and Rebecca? Did they know about this hidden wealth? Had they been staying away because they somehow knew they weren't included in the inheritance? Were they aware of our parents' financial situation and chose to distance themselves because they felt excluded or rejected? As I sat there in stunned silence with these life-changing documents spread across Dad's wooden desk like pieces of a complicated puzzle, I heard Jesus whisper again with unmistakable clarity, "Sarah, do not let your heart be troubled or your spirit become bitter. What seems like deception and manipulation is actually my divine protection working through imperfect human vessels. Your parents' hearts were carefully guarded by my wisdom, and your faithful service was never truly about money or inheritance. It was about love, honor, character development, and laying up treasures in heaven that will last for eternity." But even as I felt the Lord's supernatural peace beginning to settle over my confused and wounded spirit, I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that this shocking discovery was about to turn my family completely upside down and create conflicts that might never be resolved. Don't miss what happens next, as this inheritance revelation threatens to tear apart everything Sarah thought she knew about family loyalty, divine provision, and the true motivations behind years of sacrificial love. That evening, I sat across from my parents at our usual dinner table, the enormous weight of their carefully guarded secret pressing down on me like a heavy, suffocating blanket that made every breath difficult and every moment tense. Mom was making her typical comments about how outrageously expensive the roast beef had been at the grocery store, lamenting the rising cost of everything from milk to gasoline, and Dad was casually mentioning that we might need to consider cutting back on cable channels or canceling our newspaper subscription to save money on our monthly expenses. Every single word they spoke felt like a sharp knife cutting through my heart, knowing what I now knew about their true financial situation and their elaborate deception. "Mom, Dad," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper, my hands shaking. "As I carefully set down my fork, I found something today while looking for your insurance papers in the desk drawer." The color drained from both their faces instantly, as if someone had literally pulled a plug and watched their life force drain away. Mom's fork clattered loudly against her ceramic plate, and Dad's eyes darted nervously toward his study door as if he could somehow make that envelope disappear through sheer willpower and desperate hoping. "Sarah, sweetheart," Mom began, her voice trembling with obvious anxiety and what seemed like barely contained panic. "We can explain everything. There are things you don't understand, circumstances you're not aware of, reasons we haven't shared certain information with you children. Can you?" I asked, my voice growing stronger with righteous indignation as I pulled out the photocopied documents I had made before confronting them. "Can you possibly explain why you've been letting me believe we were struggling financially, while you have millions of dollars sitting in investment accounts earning dividends? Can you explain why you've watched me work 2 exhausting jobs, sacrifice my dreams, give up my youth, and struggle to pay your medical bills when you could have easily hired the best private care available?" Dad cleared his throat nervously, and I could see tears beginning to form in his weathered eyes. "We wanted to know," he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion and what seemed like years of carefully considered planning. "We desperately wanted to know which of our children truly loved us for who we were as people, not for what we could potentially give them through inheritance or financial support. So this was all just a test." I felt Jesus urging me to remain calm, to listen with his compassionate heart, rather than react with my wounded emotions. But the hurt and sense of betrayal was absolutely overwhelming. "You've been testing me like some kind of laboratory experiment." "Michael and Rebecca," Mom continued, her own voice breaking with obvious pain and disappointment. "They started asking persistent questions about money and inheritance the very moment your father announced his retirement. They wanted detailed information about our estate planning, our investments, our future financial plans. It broke our hearts to realize that their sudden renewed interest in spending time with us seemed to be directly tied to what they might eventually inherit from our estate. "But you, Sarah," Dad said, reaching across the table to take my trembling hand in his rough, calloused grip. "You never asked about money. You never hinted about inheritance. You never made your love conditional on financial rewards. You just loved us unconditionally. You cared for us sacrificially. You honored us faithfully even when you believed there was absolutely nothing material in it for you. Each prayer I had whispered, each tear I had shed, each sacrifice I had made had been leading us all deeper into divine territory where God's testing of human hearts hung like a mysterious shadow over all our family relationships, but where His ultimate plan for rewarding faithful love and restoring broken bonds was slowly beginning to emerge from the darkness into glorious light. Over the next several emotionally turbulent days, I found myself engaged in a spiritual battle unlike anything I had ever experienced in my entire life. Part of me felt vindicated, blessed, chosen by God for my faithfulness and sacrificial love, but another equally strong part of me felt manipulated, used, tested, and treated like a pawn in some elaborate family experiment designed to measure my character and determine my worthiness for financial reward. I called in sick to both my demanding jobs and spent countless hours walking through the peaceful park where I used to play as a carefree child, pouring out my confused heart to Jesus with raw honesty and desperate need for understanding. "Lord," I prayed desperately, my voice echoing across the empty pathways, "I don't understand your mysterious ways. I thought I was being obedient to your sacred command to honor my parents. I thought I was sacrificing for pure love, for family, devotion, for Christian duty. But was I just being naive? Was I just being tested like Job, having my faith and character examined under a spiritual microscope?" As I sat on the familiar old wooden bench overlooking the tranquil pond where ducks glided peacefully across the surface, I felt Jesus speak to my troubled heart more clearly and powerfully than ever before. "Sarah, my precious daughter, your eternal reward was never going to be earthly inheritance or material wealth. Your true reward was always going to be my inheritance, the incomparable riches of knowing me intimately, the priceless treasure of a heart that loves without conditions or expectations, the eternal blessing of being trusted with my character in the midst of difficult trials and painful testing." "But Lord," I whispered through tears that wouldn't stop flowing, "what about Michael and Rebecca? What about the family division this revelation will inevitably cause? What about justice and fairness? What about the pain this secret has created? What about the relationships that might be destroyed forever? Trust me completely. Sarah, I am about to reveal something that will transform not just your limited understanding, but your entire family's understanding of my grace, my perfect timing, and my unconditional love for all my children." That afternoon, my phone rang with an unexpected call that would change everything. It was Rebecca, calling from her busy life in California. "Sarah, I've been feeling deeply convicted about something for months now. I need to tell you and Mom and Dad something really important, something I should have shared long ago. Can we set up a video call tonight? I need to confess something that's been eating away at my conscience." When Michael called just an hour later with a remarkably similar request, his voice heavy with emotion and what sounded like years of suppressed guilt, I knew beyond any doubt that God was orchestrating something far beyond what any of us could have imagined or planned. The secrets, the guilt, the false assumptions, the misunderstandings, the hurts, everything was about to come to the surface in a divine revelation that would either heal or destroy our family forever. She was standing at the crossroads of destiny: choose faith and risk everything, or choose security and lose her soul. The revelation that was coming would either tear this family apart forever, or become the foundation for a miracle of forgiveness and restoration that would glorify Jesus for generations to come. That night, all 5 members of our fractured family gathered on a video call that would change our relationships forever. Michael was sitting in his sparse Denver apartment, looking older and more tired than I remembered from our last conversation. Months ago, Rebecca was in her sleek Los Angeles condo, her usually perfect appearance disheveled with obvious emotional stress, and I was sitting between Mom and Dad in their familiar living room, with the life-changing inheritance documents spread across the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom trial. "I need to go first," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion and barely controlled tears. I need to confess something I've been carrying like a crushing weight for 2 years. Sarah, I know you think Michael and I abandoned you to take care of Mom and Dad alone. I know you believe we were selfish, uncaring, focused only on our own lives and careers. But the truth is, we were never staying away because we were selfish, or because we didn't care about our parents. She paused, wiping tears from her face with trembling hands. We were staying away because we were deeply ashamed, humiliated, and felt completely rejected by our own family. 2 years ago, Michael and I both went through severe financial difficulties that threatened to destroy everything we had worked for. My business failed catastrophically, leaving me with enormous debts and legal problems. Michael went through that expensive, bitter divorce that drained his savings and left him emotionally devastated. We both swallowed our pride and called Mom and Dad asking for significant loans, substantial amounts of money that we desperately needed to survive. Michael nodded, his own eyes red with unshed tears and obvious emotional pain. We felt rejected, humiliated, completely abandoned when they turned us down. We thought they didn't have the money to help us, so we assumed they were just choosing not to help their own children in the most desperate crisis of our lives. We were angry, hurt, bitter, and too proud to keep coming around and pretending everything was normal. But that's not the whole story, Rebecca continued, her voice gaining strength as she prepared to reveal the shocking truth. Last week, I got an unexpected call from Dad and Mom's financial advisor. Apparently, they had been trying to reach me for months, leaving messages I never returned because I thought they were trying to collect debts. It turns out that 2 years ago, when Michael and I asked for help, Mom and Dad immediately set up substantial trust funds for both of us. They were trying to give us the money we needed, but they wanted to do it through proper legal channels, with professional tax planning and investment guidance. I looked at my parents in complete shock and amazement. You've been trying to help them all along. You never rejected them. Dad nodded solemnly. We learned about their troubles through prayer and divine revelation, not through their desperate asking. We wanted to help them more than anything, but we also wanted to teach them about wise financial stewardship, about managing money responsibly, about building long-term security. We set up those trust funds immediately, but every time our advisor tried to contact them, they wouldn't return his calls. We thought they were rejecting us, Michael said, his voice breaking with years of suppressed pain. So we rejected them first. We were too proud to accept help, too angry to listen, too hurt to understand that love sometimes comes disguised as wisdom. Jesus had been orchestrating this revelation all along, preparing hearts for a moment of truth that would either divide or unite, destroy or heal, condemn or redeem. With hearts united through the grace of Jesus, they were about to face a future where divine love would conquer all obstacles and transform their family dynamics forever. The silence that followed Rebecca and Michael's confession was heavy with years of accumulated misunderstanding, stubborn hurt, and destructive pride, but it was also pregnant with supernatural possibility, with the kind of divine hope that only comes when God's truth begins to penetrate human hearts and illuminate the darkness of deception and false assumptions that have held families captive for years. So let me understand this correctly, I said slowly, trying to process everything that had been revealed in this emotional confession that was rewriting our family history. Mom and Dad, you've been millionaires for years, but you lived simply to teach us about contentment and to test our hearts. Michael and Rebecca, you've been staying away because you thought you were rejected, when actually you were being provided for through trust funds you never claimed. And I've been sacrificing and serving, thinking I was the only faithful one, when actually God was preparing to bless all of us in ways none of us understood. Sarah, Mom said gently, reaching toward the camera as if she could somehow touch my face through the screen. We never intended for you to sacrifice your dreams or feel trapped in caregiving. We thought you were staying because you wanted to, because you found genuine joy in serving, because you felt called to honor us. We had no idea you felt trapped, or that you were working 2 jobs to help us financially when we had more than enough to provide for everyone. And we had no idea, Rebecca added, her voice filled with genuine remorse and years of regret, that you were carrying the enormous burden of their care completely alone. We thought they were managing fine with professional help, and we were too proud and hurt to reach out after what we perceived as their cruel rejection of our desperate pleas for help. Jesus was revealing how pride, false assumptions, and lack of honest communication had created a complex web of misunderstanding that had nearly destroyed their family bonds forever. But he was also revealing how his perfect love had been working behind the scenes to provide for everyone's needs, even when they couldn't see his hand moving or understand his mysterious methods. "What do we do now?" Michael asked, his voice filled with genuine hope for the first time in years. "How do we move forward from here? How do we rebuild what we've almost destroyed through our pride and assumptions?" Dad picked up the inheritance documents from the coffee table with steady hands, and with deliberate purpose, he began tearing them into pieces. "First, we're going to destroy this old will that was written in anger and disappointment. All 3 of you children are going to inherit equally from our estate, just as it should have been from the beginning. But more importantly, we're going to start living like the family God intended us to be." The trust funds for Michael and Rebecca are still available and growing with compound interest, Mom added with a warm smile that I hadn't seen in years. "Our financial advisor has been instructed to contact you both tomorrow to help you access those funds and make wise investment decisions for your futures and your families." "And Sarah," Dad said, looking directly at me with love and pride shining in his eyes, "we're hiring a full-time professional caregiver immediately. You're going back to school to finish your nursing degree, and we're paying for everything: tuition, books, living expenses. Your faithfulness has been more than rewarded, but your future is just beginning, and we want to invest in your dreams." As they established their position in the circles of faith, a new challenge emerged that would test whether their renewed love could withstand the pressures of managing wealth while maintaining the humble hearts that had brought them through this transformative crisis. 6 months later, our family had been transformed in ways that seemed absolutely impossible just a short time ago. The restoration was nothing short of miraculous. Michael had used his substantial trust fund to start a nonprofit organization helping families navigate financial crises and avoid the communication mistakes that had nearly destroyed our relationships. Rebecca had invested her money wisely in a Christian counseling center that specialized in family reconciliation and healthy communication patterns, and I was halfway through my accelerated nursing program, funded entirely by my parents' generous provision and determined to use my education to serve others facing medical crises. But the most significant change wasn't financial or professional, it was spiritual and relational. We had learned that God's provision often comes disguised as testing, that His blessings often require us to walk through dark valleys of misunderstanding and hurt, before we can appreciate the breathtaking view from the mountaintop of restored relationships and renewed love. Every Sunday, our family gathered for dinner, not because we felt obligated or guilty, but because we had rediscovered the pure joy of simply being together as people who loved each other unconditionally. We had established beautiful new traditions that strengthened our bonds: weekly family prayer time, where we shared our struggles and victories; monthly financial meetings where we discussed stewardship and giving opportunities; and quarterly family service projects where we used our resources to bless others in practical, life-changing ways. "You know what I realized?" I said one evening as we sat around the familiar table, sharing stories from our week and laughing together like we hadn't done in years. Jesus wasn't just whispering to me about the inheritance money. He was whispering to all of us about inheritance, not just the financial wealth, but the eternal inheritance of love, faithfulness, forgiveness, and restoration that He wanted to give our family as a testimony to His grace. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand with tears in her eyes. "Your faithfulness taught us about God's faithfulness. Your willingness to serve without expecting any reward showed us what unconditional love really looks like in daily practice. You demonstrated Christ's character when we couldn't see past our own fears and prejudices. And your forgiveness," Rebecca added with obvious emotion, "showed us how to forgive ourselves and each other for years of misunderstanding and hurt. You could have been bitter about the deception, but instead you chose grace." Michael nodded with deep emotion visible in his face. "I spent 2 years angry at Mom and Dad for what I thought was their heartless rejection of our needs. But God was teaching me about humility, about asking for help the right way, about swallowing pride for the sake of relationship. The trust fund was always there. I just couldn't receive it because of my wounded pride." Dad cleared his throat, and I could see the deep emotion and regret in his wise eyes. "We thought we were testing you children to see who really loved us for ourselves rather than our money. But God was testing us too. He was teaching us about the difference between wisdom and manipulation, between protection and deception, between good stewardship and hoarding our blessings selfishly. Their story through Jesus had become the foundation of a spiritual empire, hearts united in faith, transforming not just their own family dynamics, but impacting their entire community through ministries, nonprofits, and acts of service that demonstrated God's love in practical, life-changing ways that touched hundreds of families. As I reflect on this incredible journey of family restoration, I realize that Jesus wasn't just whispering about an inheritance or financial provision. He was whispering about identity, about purpose, about the kind of legacy that matters in eternity and impacts generations. The money, the trust funds, the investments, those were just tools in God's mighty hands. The real treasure was the transformation of our hearts and the complete restoration of our relationships through His grace and forgiveness. I think about other families who might be struggling with similar issues right now, caught in webs of misunderstanding and hurt. Maybe there's a daughter out there sacrificing her dreams to care for aging parents, wondering if anyone notices or cares about her faithfulness and daily sacrifice. Maybe there's a son who feels rejected by his family, too proud to reach out, too hurt to try again, living in isolation when love is available. Maybe there are parents struggling with how to teach their children about money, values, and faithfulness in a world that seems to worship wealth above relationships and character above service. To that faithful daughter, I want to say with all my heart, your service is not unnoticed by God. He sees every sacrifice, every moment of selfless care, every tear shed in the darkness when no one else is watching or acknowledging your devotion. Your reward may not come in the form you expect, but it will come in the form your heart needs most, sometimes through earthly blessings, always through spiritual growth and eternal rewards. To that hurting son, I want to say with compassion, pride is a prison that keeps us from receiving love, but humility is the key that unlocks the door to relationship and blessing. Sometimes the rejection we think we're experiencing is actually protection we don't yet understand. Sometimes the help we need is available, but we have to be willing to receive it with grace and gratitude rather than demand it with entitlement. To those struggling parents, I want to say with understanding, your children are watching, learning, and being shaped by your example every single day. They need to see not just your wealth, but your wisdom, not just your provision, but your principles, not just your success, but your faith in action. They need to know they're loved for who they are, not what they might inherit. Our family's story became a powerful testimony that has touched hundreds of lives through the ministries we've supported. The counseling Rebecca provides to struggling families, the nonprofit Michael runs for families in financial crisis, and the nursing care I now provide to families facing medical emergencies. We learned that when God blesses us financially, it's not so we can live in luxury and comfort, but so we can live in service and generosity, being His hands and feet to a hurting world. She was standing at the crossroads of eternity, share her story and inspire generations, or keep the blessing to herself and miss the opportunity to be part of God's greater plan for healing families and restoring relationships through the transformative power of Jesus Christ and His unfailing love. The inheritance that changed our family's destiny was never really about money or financial security. It was about the inheritance every believer has in Jesus Christ, the inheritance of love, forgiveness, restoration, and eternal purpose that transcends material wealth. When we choose to live faithfully, even when we can't see the bigger picture, God is writing a story that will impact not just our own lives, but the lives of generations to come through His miraculous grace. Today, as I sit in my own beautiful home, married to a wonderful Christian man who supported me through nursing school and loved me through the family crisis, with our first child on the way and our second already kicking in my womb, I can see how God's plan was always bigger than our limited understanding. The whisper Jesus gave me that day in my father's study wasn't just about discovering hidden wealth. It was about discovering hidden character, hidden faithfulness, hidden love that had been tested by fire and found to be pure gold that would shine for eternity. With hearts united through the eternizing grace of Jesus, our family story revealed that God's provision was just the beginning of a legacy that would touch lives, heal families, demonstrate His love for generations to come, and prove that no family is beyond redemption when surrendered to His perfect will and timing. If this transformation story through Jesus blessed your heart and strengthened your faith in God's ability to restore broken families, press that like button, subscribe to the channel, share with someone who needs family healing, and ring the bell for more miraculous stories of God's grace. Comment Amen if Jesus touched your heart through this testimony of His faithful provision and supernatural family restoration. Remember, in God's infinite love, where families are healed and hearts restored through the power of Jesus Christ, there is always another story of Jesus transforming family pain into divine purpose, broken relationships into beautiful testimonies, and generational wounds into generational blessings. Until the next testimony of His wonderful, life-changing grace,